The Pacific night was still, broken only by the rhythm of the ocean against cold steel. Deep beneath those black waters moved a predator unlike any other, the USS Barb. To most, it was just another submarine in the American fleet, but under Commander Eugene Fluckey, it would become a legend that defied the boundaries of naval warfare. The crew aboard her didn't yet know it, but their name was about to be carved into history as the submarine that did the impossible. Fluckey was not a man who believed in limits. While others followed the manual, he rewrote it. His philosophy was simple. If you can imagine it, you can achieve it. In a war ruled by numbers, he chased the improbable. Where most commanders saw danger, he saw opportunity. He led the Barb with a kind of fearless logic, a balance of daring and discipline that kept his men loyal beyond measure. To them, he wasn't just their commander. He was the kind of leader who could make the ocean itself seem like an ally. Every patrol under his command carried a sense of unpredictability. The Barb was no longer a silent observer beneath the sea. It was a hunter that struck with precision and vanished before anyone could react. In enemy waters where death lurked at every sonar ping, Fluckey found a way to turn chaos into strategy. He demanded excellence, but rewarded creativity, often bending the rules if it meant survival. The result was a crew willing to risk everything for victory, and a submarine that would rewrite the future of naval warfare. By early 1945, the Barb had already achieved feats no other submarine dared attempt. She penetrated heavily guarded harbors, launched the first submarine-based rocket attacks in history, and evaded entire fleets that tried to hunt her down. But Fluckey wanted more than victories. He wanted proof that innovation could win wars. It was during one of those final patrols, near the Japanese coast, that an idea began to form. A mission so bold that even his most seasoned officers questioned it. What if, he thought, a submarine could strike not just at sea, but on land? It sounded insane. Submarines were built to sink ships, not sabotage trains. Yet, as Fluckey studied the enemy coastline through his periscope, he noticed something unusual, a railroad running close to the shore. Every night, a train rumbled by, transporting troops and supplies deep into Japan's war machine. To most, it was just another observation. To Fluckey, it was an opportunity, a target no submarine had ever touched. For days, he observed, planned, and imagined the unthinkable. His crew listened in disbelief when he finally shared his idea. They would surface near Japan, send a small landing team ashore in the dead of night, and blow up that train. A submarine sinking a train, it sounded like madness. But aboard the Barb, madness was another word for genius. The plan required perfection. 8 men would paddle ashore under the cover of darkness, plant explosives on the railway tracks, and escape before dawn. Every second would matter. One mistake and they'd be caught, tortured, or killed. But if they succeeded, they'd achieve what no one thought possible: a submarine striking the Japanese homeland itself. The tension aboard the Barb was electric as preparations began. Tools were forged from scrap metal, explosives calibrated by hand, and the crew rehearsed every movement in silence. The submarine moved closer to the coast, her engines barely a whisper. Every man aboard knew the risk, and every one of them was willing to take it. Then came the night. The sea was calm, the moon hidden behind clouds, a perfect omen. As the submarine surfaced, the hatch opened, and the 8 volunteers climbed out, lowering their rubber rafts into the dark water. Behind them, their crewmates watched in silence, hearts pounding with a mix of pride and fear. The rafts drifted toward the enemy's shore, disappearing into the shadows. Fluckey stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the coastline, knowing that history was unfolding beneath those clouds. 8 men were out there, deep inside enemy territory, carrying the hopes of everyone aboard. In that stillness, even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. And somewhere in the distance, the faint rumble of a train began to grow louder. The train's echo rolled through the misty coastline like a warning drumbeat. Somewhere inland, the rhythmic clatter of steel wheels on track carried across the dark silence of the Pacific shore. 8 men, barely visible shapes in the moonless night, were already deep inland, crouched near the railway that pulsed with life and danger. These weren't special forces or saboteurs. They were sailors, submariners, who had traded their torpedoes for courage and a few pounds of explosives. Their leader on the ground was Paul Saunders, the Barb's quartermaster. He moved with silent confidence, every step sinking softly into the wet sand and grass. Behind him, the team worked quickly, guided only by the dull glow of their watches. Their mission was clear: plant the explosives, set the timer, and vanish before the Japanese patrols could react. Flucky watched from the bridge of the submarine, miles offshore, peering into darkness that revealed nothing. His men were out there, his responsibility, his family, and every second that passed weighed heavier on his chest. The sea was calm, but inside him raged a storm of anticipation. The operation was now in motion, and all they could do was wait. On land, the team reached the railway. The cold steel gleamed faintly in the dark. They worked fast, attaching the demolition charge under the rail joint, a crude but brilliant design that would trigger when the next train passed. Saunders set the timer, whispering the countdown like a prayer. Then, without a word, the team melted back into the forest, hearts pounding as they retraced their steps toward the shore. Every sound, the rustle of grass, the snap of a twig, felt like a death sentence. In the distance, the rumble of the approaching train grew louder. Tom was slipping away. The men paddled frantically once they reached their rafts, the rhythmic splash of oars blending with the haunting whistle of the train approaching the coast. Aboard the Barb, silence ruled. The crew gathered on deck, faces turned toward the black line of the horizon. Flucky's eyes never left the coastline. He gripped the rail tightly, calculating the distance, the timing, waiting for the impossible to happen. And then it did. A blinding flash tore through the night, followed by a thunderous explosion that split the silence wide open. A fireball leapt into the sky as the train's boilers and ammunition cars detonated, scattering metal and flames across the shore. The shockwave reached even the submarine, vibrating through her steel hull like a heartbeat of triumph. For a moment, no one spoke. The men stared, awestruck, as the horizon burned orange. Then the reality hit them. They had done it. A submarine had just destroyed a train. Cheers erupted across the deck, breaking every rule of stealth and discipline. Men who had faced death 100 times were laughing, shouting, pounding each other on the back. Even Flucky, ever the composed commander, allowed himself a rare grin. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "we just made history." The Barb dove moments later, vanishing beneath the waves as Japanese searchlights swept the coastline in panic. Above them, the sky still glowed faintly from the burning wreckage, a symbol of audacity and innovation that no enemy radar could ever detect. As the submarine slipped silently back into the deep, the crew gathered in the mess deck, reliving every second of the mission. They laughed, replayed the explosion in their minds, and etched the moment into memory. Someone sketched a small image on the Barb's battle flag, a train, with explosion marks around it. It was a gesture of pride, of madness, of legacy. When the Barb finally returned from that patrol, the U.S. Navy could hardly believe the report. A submarine had attacked Japan's mainland, not with torpedoes, but with courage and ingenuity. The operation was never repeated. It didn't need to be. One strike had been enough to prove what human imagination could achieve under fire. For the men of the Barb, it wasn't about medals or headlines. It was about doing the impossible and surviving to tell the tale. They had stared down the limits of warfare and rewritten them in a single night. The Pacific War would rage on, but something had changed forever. Deep beneath the ocean, one submarine had just proven that even in the darkest waters, human daring could still light the sky. Long after the final bombs stopped falling, the name USS Barb refused to fade. Among hundreds of submarines that prowled the Pacific, hers was the one whispered with awe, not because of how many ships she sank, but because of how far she dared to dream. Under Commander Eugene Flucky, the Barb had done what no other vessel even imagined. She had turned war into an art of possibility. By the war's end, the Navy's official records listed her among the most successful submarines in American history. But statistics couldn't measure what made her extraordinary. Flucky's brilliance lay not in the number of torpedoes he fired, but in his vision that a submarine could be more than a hunter in the deep. It could strike on land, rescue the stranded, even challenge the impossible. He taught his crew that innovation wasn't born from safety, it was born from nerve. And the Barb's men carried that lesson in every patrol, every dive, every silent hour beneath the sea. When peace finally returned, the Barb continued to serve. She was recommissioned under the Navy's Guppy program, refitted with modern systems, and later loaned to Italy under a new name, Enrico Tizzoli. Even when her American flag was replaced, the spirit that once haunted Japan's coastline lived on in her steel. In 1972, she was sold for scrap, but to those who had sailed her, it felt like losing an old friend. Flucky once said that if his crew had known, they would have bought her themselves, set her up on the shore, and let her stand as a monument to courage. The commander's post-war years carried the same energy that had defined his time at sea. He became Director of Naval Intelligence, guiding younger officers with the same bold philosophy that had once driven him through typhoon and torpedo fire. Later, far from the sound of engines and sonar, he devoted his life to helping children orphaned by war. The man who once commanded the deadliest machine beneath the ocean spent his final years bringing peace to lives shattered by conflict. In 1992, Flucky shared his story with the world through Thunder Below, a memoir that captured not just the missions, but the spirit behind them. It wasn't a tale of destruction. It was a testament to creativity under pressure, to laughter in danger, to the thin line between fear and greatness. Every submariner who read it could feel the heartbeat of the Barb in its pages, the pulse of men who refused to surrender to limits. But perhaps the most unforgettable legacy belonged to those 8 sailors who crept ashore that July night in 1945. Their footprints vanished with the tide, but their act shook an empire. No monument bears their names, yet every explosion of inspiration that followed in naval history can trace its echo to them. They proved that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the darkness, plants its charge, and disappears into the sea. Today, the Barb's story stands as more than history. It's a challenge. A reminder that bravery is not about strength alone, but imagination. That victory favors those willing to go beyond what's expected. The men of the Barb didn't just fight a war. They redefined how wars could be fought. And long after their submarine slipped beneath the waves for the last time, her wake still ripples across the oceans of memory, whispering the same timeless truth. The impossible is only impossible until someone dares to try.